Chapter 12. The cliff wall vanished. Vicky realized it was some sort of trick. A projection, maybe. Something done with mirrors. Instead of smashing on the rocks, the car rushed into the mouth of a giant cave. Vicky looked overhead as Batman stopped the car. They were in an enormous cavern. Floodlights overhead illuminated the chamber. In places, she could see cave walls of rough-hewn stone. In others, passages twisted their way into darkness. The cave was so vast that the floodlights could really penetrate only small portions of the overall chamber, making pools of light in a sea of total dark. She could identify some things in the better lit corners of the gloom. Over against the far wall was a whole bank of computers, next to a lathe and a jigsaw and rows of tools. A fully equipped machine shop. Beyond that was a table piled with flasks and beakers and Bunsen burners. She guessed it was some sort of chemical analysis setup. Vicky said she wouldn't be surprised if Batman had a whole crime lab down here. She climbed out of the car as Batman got out of the other side. She carefully walked further into the cave, trying to get a closer look at everything. Batman followed her, keeping his distance. Vicky stepped toward him into a circle of light. "Watch your step in here," he suggested. Vicky looked behind her to her right, the direction she would have walked. Another step and she would have stepped into a pit so deep that the light didn't show the bottom. She kicked a pebble over the edge. No sound echoed back to her. The pit seemed to go down forever. She looked up. Suspended over the bottomless pit were a pair of gymnast rings. "Welcome to the Batcave," Batman said. There was another sound far above her, the high shrieking cries of animals. She looked further overhead above the gymnast rings and saw the shadows of wings in the lights at the roof of the cave. She shivered when she realized what it was. "Bats," she said softly. "They're terrifying." "That's kind of the idea," Batman agreed. He walked over toward the computer wall and a small birdcage, half in shadow, that she hadn't seen before. Vicky followed him over. She realized as she approached that the cage didn't contain a bird. It held a small bat with a broken wing, wrapped in bandage and splint. Batman patted the cage. Bats are great survivors. He moved on to a table, piled high with papers. Vicky kept her distance from the bat cage she followed. Behind Batman was a clothes rack, full of hanging bat costumes. She strolled over to take a look. The fabric felt odd between her fingers. It was like no clothing she'd ever seen. An odd combination of natural fibers and something that stretched like rubber, but more than that too. As thin as the fabric was, it had density and weight, as if the center of the cloth was woven steel. "What are they made of?" she asked when Batman looked up from his papers. He shook his head. "It doesn't have a name." Batman didn't seem the talkative sort. She realized she didn't even know why she'd been brought here. "What are you going to do to me?" she asked point blank, approaching him quickly. She wanted to get a good look at his face. She'd find out something more about him, whether he wanted her to or not. He glanced at her approach and took a single step away. He was instantly lost in shadow. "You're going to do something for me," Batman replied. "What do you mean by that?" She watched As he walked behind the lab table, now that she was closer, she could see more than beakers and Bunsen burners. There were cosmetics, deodorants, shampoos, all sorts of products. On Batman's left, a computer printer began to chatter. Vicky looked at a monitor next to the printer, automatically scrolling through an endless list. "What is all this?" she asked. Batman turned toward her. His hands above the table were in light, but his face was still in darkness. "The police have got it all wrong," he said brusquely. "They're looking for one product. It's much bigger than that. The Joker's tainted hundreds of basic chemicals at the source." At the source? Vicky looked at the vast array of cosmetics and beauty care items spread out before her, and she struggled to comprehend exactly what he was saying. But then whole shipments of every product would be poisoned. We'd all be dead. He shook his head in the darkness. "No. Each product only contains one component. The poison only works when they're mixed." He picked up a can off the table. "Hairspray won't do it alone, but hairspray mixed with perfume and lipstick would be toxic. And..." His hand swept above the drugstore's worth of products. "Untraceable." Really? This was quite a story. Batman seemed to be more than just another guy in a cape punching bad guys. But Vicky realized it wasn't as simple as that. If she wanted to have a real story, one that she could print, she needed to determine his methods, to make sure this was more than speculation. "How'd you figure that out?" she asked. He didn't reply. He walked away from her again, back into the darkness. Maybe she thought there wouldn't be a story after all. When he turned back to her, he had a thick manila envelope in his hands. He stepped forward and passed it to her. "Take this to the press." She looked inside. There must have been 50 sheets of paper full of chemical equations and lists of tainted products. Still, once the data entered her mind, it was hard to get rid of it. She remembered all the rumors and speculation in the news office about who the Batman really was and what he really wanted. These papers all looked very impressive at first glance, but what happened if the science editor at the Globe took a look at it and decided it was all nonsense? She didn't want to promise anything she couldn't deliver. "I may have some trouble with that," she said at last. "A lot of people think you and the Joker work together." Batman's reply was quick and harsh. "Do me a favor. Don't flatter my enemy. The man's psychotic." Vicky looked up from the papers. "Some people say the same about you." Batman paused as if that thought was new to him. "What people?" he said at last, his voice much softer than before. "Well, let's face it," Vicky replied frankly. "You're not exactly normal, are you?" This time, Batman's answer was more confident. "It's not a normal world." He stepped back as he spoke. He was swallowed again by the darkness. Vicky suppressed the urge to shiver all over again. The strangeness of her situation seemed to grow with every passing minute. What really did she know about this Batman? "Why'd you bring me here?" she asked, hoping he didn't hear the catch in her voice. He had moved in the darkness. His voice was behind her. "People need that information." "But you could have just said it," she shot back. Again, there was no immediate reply. Vicky looked around, trying to catch some movement in the total darkness. But there was no movement, no sound. She could be all alone, lost in an endless cavern. You're right, he said in her ear. She gasped. He stood right in front of her. I could have. He added, there is something else. Vicky had trouble breathing regularly enough to answer him. What? She managed. You have something I want, he replied. He took a step toward her. She took an automatic step away. She looked behind her and saw that she was almost at the edge of the pit. How had she gotten back here? Had Batman maneuvered her to the edge so she couldn't escape? She looked back. Batman was very close to her. Her hand clutched her blouse. What could I have that you want? Her voice suddenly sounded very small. Batman swirled his cape over her. She felt trapped. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream. His arms encircled her. That calmed her somehow. It was odd. Somewhere beneath the panic, there was something familiar, even reassuring about the embrace. He freed one of his hands and raised his glove toward her face. There was something in that glove, something acrid. She felt her eyes close. The lids were too heavy to keep them open. It was knockout gas. The panic wanted to rise in her again, but she was tired. Too tired. Everything. Batman, the cave, the pools of darkness and light. Everything was fading away. The last sound she heard was the flapping of wings. Bat wings. She opened her eyes. Sunlight streamed through the windows. She was in her own apartment, in her own bed. What was she doing here? Batman, the Joker, Batcave, had it all been some sort of a dream? She pulled off the sheet and saw she was still wearing the clothes from the day before. So it was all real. Batman must have brought her here. But there was something else. Something she had hidden. Something she didn't want him to find. She sat up and searched inside her blouse. It was gone. The film, she said with a vehemence that almost made the words sound like a curse. He took the film. What could she do? She stared blankly for a moment at the patterns the sunlight made on her floor. The phone rang. She reached over to the side of the bed, realizing with the movement she was still a little woozy. She picked up the receiver. Hello? She managed. Vicky? It was Ollie Knox's voice. He sounded concerned. No wonder the way she answered the phone. Are you alright? You want me to come over? No, she replied with more certainty than she felt. That's when she saw something on the bedside table. Wait, Allie? She picked up the envelope Batman had given her. Allie, she asked as she glanced at the bedside alarm clock, can you still make the evening edition if I bring something to you? Just barely. Knox replied. Is it hot? Is it ever? Vicky thought. Yeah, it's hot, was her reply. How hot? Knox insisted. She hung up on him. Better to get this off to him than to spend the rest of the day in idle chatter. Very hot, she said to herself.